If you've been hanging around the virtual reality space for a while, you've definitely heard this kind of news before. I mean, we saw the shutdown of AltSpace VR, we lived through the near-death scares of VR chat, and we've watched Meta's Horizon World slowly pivot away from VR headsets toward mobile. But the recent announcement that Rec Room is permanently shutting its doors on June 1st, 2026, that hits completely differently. We are literally watching the death of a genuine digital giant. So today, we're doing an explainer on this platform. A platform that seemingly had it all to figure out exactly why a virtual world this massive is being deleted forever. 150 million. Let's just pause on that for a second. To put that into perspective, that's roughly the entire population of Russia. That is the cumulative player base Rec Room built over its 10-year run. By basically any traditional tech industry metric, having 150 million people register and engage with your product is just an astronomical success. It's the kind of scale developers literally dream of. And yet, it wasn't enough. Well, that brings us to this harsh, really devastating admission from the developers themselves in their shutdown announcement. They flat out stated that their massive scale just couldn't fix a fundamentally broken business model. No matter how big they got, their costs continuously overwhelmed their revenue. It's a pretty stark reminder for us that in today's tech landscape, popularity definitely does not equal profitability.
Let's dive into Segment 1. What was Rec Room? The rise of a cross-platform giant. To really understand the fall, we first got to look at the incredible heights this platform reached. Rec Room's history is honestly a masterclass in aggressive expansion. They launched way back in 2016 as a super niche, VR-only app for the HTC Vive. We're talking primitive, teleport-only movement here. But when VR headset adoption didn't explode like everyone predicted, they did something incredibly smart. They decoupled from VR. In 2018, they expanded to flat-screen platforms like PC and PlayStation, making it a super rare, truly cross-platform social space. And man, this strategy worked flawlessly for user acquisition. Driven by the pandemic lockdown boom, venture capital firms valued this company at a staggering $3.5 billion by 2021. They eventually expanded to 10 different platforms, seeing a huge surge of mobile users by 2025. But, as you'll see, that same year brought brutal layoffs, leading right up to this March 2026 shutdown announcement.
What's truly staggering to me is the sheer human investment this represents. Rec Room wasn't just a video game, it was a virtual third place. Players poured a cumulative 68,000 years of their lives into these digital spaces. Think about that. The top user-generated rooms alone saw over 500 years of playtime each, and players formed over 500 million friendships here. The cultural impact is absolutely undeniable. This was a space where people built communities, fought off isolation, and expressed just immense creativity.
Moving on to Segment 2. The monetization problem, the paradox of scale.
Okay, so why close? To understand the unforgiving economic pressures that forced Rec Room to pull the plug, we need to talk about a term industry analysts use, the zombie company. See, Rec Room had raised nearly $300 million from venture capital, and that massive $3.5 billion valuation from 2021, that actually became a trap. Venture capital relies on hypergrowth. They want you to be the next Facebook. When the global economic environment shifted, interest rates went up, and the so-called metaverse winter set in, investors stopped caring about user growth. They started demanding sustainable unit economics. Rec Room was making money, sure, but it couldn't grow fast enough to justify its massive valuation, and it couldn't turn a net profit to survive on its own.
Which brings us to a really crucial concept for VR platforms, the UGC profit gap. Rec Room was totally built around user-generated content, or UGC. They empowered players to build rooms and sell virtual items. But there was a fatal, structural flaw in how they set up this creator economy. Expanding their user-generated content actually destroyed their profit margins.
Let's look at this fatal margin flip in action. When a player spent $1 on an item Rec Room made itself, a first-party item, the company kept about 70 cents after paying the platform fees to Apple or Sony. Pretty good. But when a player bought an item made by a user, Rec Room only kept about 30 cents, passing the rest to the platform and the creator. By 2025, user-generated content made up 60% of total player spending. So, as the platform became wildly more successful and UGC absolutely boomed, Rec Room's actual take-home revenue per dollar spent was shrinking drastically.
And here is where the math just completely falls apart. Rec Room's strategy was to literally be everywhere, 10 different platforms. This brought in a massive surge of mobile and console users. But these users skewed very young, primarily 13 to 16 years old. And let's be honest, this demographic rarely spends real money. Yet supporting millions of young users across 10 platforms meant compounding massive costs for server infrastructure, optimization, and most importantly, child safety moderation. The cost to keep the platform running and safe scaled exponentially, and it completely overwhelmed that tiny 30% cut they were making on the creator content.
Which leads us to segment 3, the archive crisis and what happens to the community. We've done the financial autopsy, but the immediate human fallout is happening right now. The platform is currently in this highly restrictive wind-down phase to prevent economic volatility, and it's sparking a total diaspora panic about where these millions of users are going to go next. VR chat? Horizon Worlds? Some alternative? Right now, account creation is locked. You can't even add new friends. Token purchases officially ended on May 1st. And for the creators who actually relied on this platform to pay their rent, their earnings hard stop on May 18th, with a final payout processing right before the servers go permanently dark at noon Pacific on June 1st. These deadlines are absolute.
And this is the genuinely heartbreaking part, the crisis of digital permanence for VR game design. Creators built incredible, living, playable environments governed by really complex logic circuits. But because Rec Room relies on proprietary server-side networking, you literally cannot download a working copy of your room. What creators are allowed to keep are just raw, static data exports. And to make it worse, to prevent crashes, the export tools strip out the complex interactive circuits entirely. Years of creative work are essentially being reduced to unplayable, lobotomized data files.
But man, the community is absolutely not going down without a fight. Sparked by the growing Stop Killing Games consumer rights movement, grassroots fan revivals are springing into action. Projects with names like Restroom and Radium are desperately racing the clock right now. They're trying to capture network traffic and reverse engineer the server APIs before June 1st, hoping to eventually launch open-source private servers to save their digital heritage. It's a massive undertaking.
Let's zoom out a bit for segment 4, the bigger picture. Is standalone VR social even viable?
When we look at what this closure tells us about the broader VR industry, a really clear pattern emerges. Rec Room captured a young demographic with a low 30% platform rake, and it didn't survive. VR Chat, on the other hand, targets an older 18-plus demographic and crucially allows its creators to retain 50% of the revenue, sharing the rest with hosting providers. This actually allowed a sustainable professional class of creators to emerge on VR Chat, keeping it active and viable. Meanwhile, Meta's Horizon Worlds has essentially ceased pure VR development to pivot entirely to mobile, keeping the lights on only because of Meta's incredibly deep pockets.
So what happens to all that underlying tech? Well, it doesn't just vanish. Snap Inc., the parent company of Snapchat, has actually stepped in to acquire Rec Room's assets and hire its top talent. But here's the kicker. They aren't saving the social game. They are absorbing Rec Room's expertise in multiplayer spatial logic to bolster their upcoming push into augmented reality smart glasses. That is a definitive, undeniable shift in the industry's focus. So what are our ultimate takeaways from this whole explainer? First, the era of hyper-growth, venture-backed VR funding based purely on user numbers, it's entirely dead. Investors demand immediate sustainability in 2026. Second, Rec Room proved that moderating a safe virtual environment for millions of children is basically an unfunded liability. It is way too expensive to maintain without a high-margin business model. And finally, the immersive metaverse we all envisioned is actively being cannibalized to build our wearable, augmented reality future. Rec Room's failure was not a failure of its community. It was a failure of economics, acting as the ultimate canary in the coal mine for the metaverse winter.
Which leaves us staring at an empty room and a massive community suddenly without a home. The server shut down at noon on June 1st. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. What was your most memorable Rec Room moment? And as the dust settles on this 150 million player diaspora, where exactly do you think this community ends up next? Thanks so much for exploring this with me today.